to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It means something. It means something. You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. This is a science thing. It is a science place. It's a scientific fact that we're all up in your face at this time. Once again, for the one, the only, Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. So here we go. This is episode 263. This is a part 2 episode with Mr. Aaron Beam of Red Fang. So if you haven't already, listen in to episode 253. I guess it's been 10 episodes. Okay. 253 that kind of goes into everything from the first EP up to Whales and Leeches. That's good stuff. Consider that a companion piece. Really, you'll want to buy both volumes. It's quite the compendium. And that's available anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this, you probably have the ability to listen to that as well. So, but this is part 2 of that. Let me rip into this. If it is your first time listening to the show, Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal is a long-running podcast about music and musicians. This is episode 263. If this is your first time listening to the show, all of the archives are at protonicreversal.com and are always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you'd like to support the show or get episodes sooner, you can give $1 a month to patreon.com/protonicreversal. If you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to share it along. Like, subscribe, or post a review. All that helps people find the show and is just a darn nice thing to do. Cool. Got through that. Minimal of hassle and effort. Appreciate everyone tuning in, listening in, whatever. Anyway, let's get right down to it and talk to Mr. Aaron Beam of Red Fang. And here we are once again for the incredible part 2 with Mr. Aaron Beam of Red Fang. Aaron, welcome back, sir. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back.
So last time we left it, we kind of tore through most of the Red Fang discography. But we didn't get, there's 2 things we didn't get to. First of all, it's a new record. Secondly, there was one missing. There was a record missing that we didn't get to. And I wanted to, if we're going to honor the albums and kind of go through in detail on them, kind of seems disingenuous to leave out one of the bigger ones, right? So why don't we do this? We got through Whales and Leeches was the last one we talked to, so let's talk about Only Ghosts. Can we talk a little bit about that record and a little different, a little bit of a different approach? Where were you guys at the time?
So we had, after finishing Whales and Leeches, we decided that maybe for the next record that we'd try to, well, in the process of doing Whales and Leeches, we were distracted quite a lot because we did it in Portland and we had a lot of personal business going on. I think just because we'd been gone so much on tour. And so we just made a decision that we wanted to try to do something different for Only Ghosts. And so we did it as a destination record, like a destination wedding. And we went down to Venice Beach, California, and recorded it in Ross Robinson's house/studio. It was a pretty amazing experience, really. It was the first time that any of us had ever done anything like that. We ended up living in his house for a month, and the studio was just on the ground floor. So it was like every single day you'd wake up to the sound of your record being made, and it was immersive is the best way I can describe it.
Sure, yeah, and of course, Ross Robinson did Blood Brothers. He's done quite a few bands, some of which I'm less into than others, of course. But At the Drive-In, the big At the Drive-In record.
Yep.
How did you end up connecting with him? Was he a fan already? Was that something that was arranged?
It was. I don't actually remember specifically if he already knew about us, but we are good friends with a band from Bellingham called Wild Throne. They had a different name. Yeah, they had a different name before they recorded with Ross. Yes, exactly. Dog Shredder. And we toured with them.
Part of the Sunrise is
oh my god,
like one of my favorite things, and
it's amazing.
I'm just going to do the thing where I break in and talk about something completely unrelated, but they played the Stork Club in Oakland on a Monday, and of course I and it was like something ridiculous, like, oh, there's 7th out of a 7-band bill of 2 double billed things that are put together. But I was still texting, calling everyone, like, come down to this show right now. They're like, you're tripping. It's a Monday.
Oh, right.
I need to come out. And I think I managed, of like the dozen or so people I was pestering, I managed about 3 people to come out. And they were, each one of them were like, oh my God, I'm so glad I came out. I'm like, what did I tell you? Yes, you think I take this lightly? But yeah, Dog Shredder, incredible. Later became Wild Throne. So they introduced you to. They'd done a record with him, and then our friends Cancer Bats had done a record with him. And I feel like that I can't remember if he actually. It's been so long that I don't remember the exact timeline. I just remember his name coming up, and maybe from our manager, or maybe he had reached out. I'm not really sure. But we talked to both Wild Throne and Cancer Bats, and they both said the same thing. They said, if you have a chance to record with them, you absolutely have to do it. They both loved the experience, as did we. And once we expressed any interest at all, Ross actually flew up to Portland just for an afternoon, just to come meet us. He was only there for like 3 hours. He was like, I landed. Wow. If somebody can meet you guys someplace. We like met for sandwiches and a beer or something. And then he was like, okay, I got to go back to the airport. And that just really like, that kind of dedication, like you can't really deny that. So we just knew at that moment, like, of course we're going to do this record with Ross. And it was, it was pretty life-changing experience. So thanks to him. So first of all, just the idea, and for those that are, and a lot of people that listen to the show are musicians themselves or have been involved in the music world, but the idea of going to a place to record, like having like a destination where that's what you're doing. You're there. Like it's free of distraction. Nobody's like going home. No, did I feed the dog? Did whatever. Right. Like all of those things have to be sorted out ahead of time, and your concentration is on the art and on the music. And did that change for you guys? Did that change how you approached recording it, or were you able just to kind of listen a little deeper, or just what was the difference between that and doing the other ones, which all were generally closer to home with the distractions of home as well?
A lot of it was actually about the preparation. That was much, much different because ever since Murder the Mountains, we've gone in with several finished songs, but then just kind of a lot of ideas, because we know we have the luxury of, okay, we can do some basic tracking and then start adding overdubs. We can even do it a month later, or I can just do something from home and mail it in. But in this case, when we originally booked the time with Ross, it was only 2 weeks. So, and he said, he had warned us, you have to sing while we're tracking. Like while we're tracking drums, we have to be like, he's like, you also have to have lyrics ready. And so, because so much of what he does is about what does this song mean? And let's try to I need to know what the song is about and what it means so that we can get the best recorded representation of the essence of this song's pretty pretty intimidated by that at first. But what we did was So what we did was we approached it like, let's just get as much of a live set ready as we can of brand new material. And then we actually toured down to the studio because we wanted to bring all of our own equipment. So we just, we booked a tiny little like 4 or 5 show tour where we played a bunch of the brand new songs on the way down to his place. And then once you're there and you get into it, his whole process was also way different from anybody that we've worked with before. It's essentially like one song at a time. You just do one song from start to finish. And so you jam it a few times for him, and then he sits it's a pretty small room that we do the drum tracking in. We're all crammed in there, and it was super hot. And he would come in after we'd gone through it a couple times and then just listen to us play it a few times and then offer arrangement ideas, like ideas for different ways to approach the drums, because we're focusing on getting drum tracks at first. And then we'd record basically for tracking drums. We'd record scratch everything, including vocals, and we could hear everything in our headphones all the time. We all had like very specific mixes. Right. And, we just do a bunch of takes of the drums until we got the ones that just felt the most powerful. And he'd edit it all together. And then I'd go back and do bass, and then I'd add the guitars, and then we'd add vocals last. But it was one song at a time. So from start to finish, just so that it makes sense based on the way that he, like I was saying earlier, he wants to capture the sonic essence of the meaning of the song. And so to kind of break out of that feeling and like go into like, what if one song is about, flowers and the next one is about burying your dog or whatever? Like, it's hard to shift back and forth between those feelings.
Yeah. So his thing is to do just kind of stick to the one.
Exactly.
All right. And that's, a little bit different than how you guys have worked traditionally. Was there any sort of like whiplash with that to kind of like, oh, okay, sure, yeah? Or was there a situation where like, oh, I guess it's about this? Or was it all pretty well?
I think that Brian and I knew pretty well what our own songs were about. I generally write lyrics. I know it sounds silly, but actually, usually when I write lyrics, I'll just like have a melody already, right, and then just grab a pencil and then just kind of like poop out a whole bunch of lyrics and then start singing it. And then it's only later when I read them, I'm like, oh, now I see what I was writing about. Like, I don't know what it means until I've already finished it. And then I have to write a second verse. It's usually I write the second verse, just stream of consciousness, and then I have to figure out what the hell it means so that I can write a second verse.
Right. Like whatever your subconscious was on about when you did it down.
Exactly. So, but then the scary thing is that with Ross, it's like, okay, you have to tell everybody in this room right now exactly what this song is about. And in some cases, it's pretty gnarly, pretty personal stuff.
Yeah.
And that was like, for me, I'm already a pretty sherry guy. So it was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And I think it made other people more uncomfortable than it made me for me to share all this stuff. But for Brian, it was, I mean, he'll admit this, that it was a more painful process for him to go through that with Ross. And I think he ended up he said this before in interviews, he ended up being like, there was times when he wanted to kill Ross for forcing him to, reveal the true meaning of his lyrics. But, so it was, it was pretty weird. And also the thing that makes it a little awkward for me, and probably for Brian too, is that suddenly it feels like the focus of your band is on what do the lyrics mean, whereas for 10 years, the focus of our band was like, how do we write riffs that make people want to like throw beer at us?
Right. Killer riffs. Like Red Fang is a killer riff band. And
exactly.
That's almost the raison d'etre of the outfit. So to have a sudden shift towards like, well, what do you specifically mean by this, this writing prompt that led to this lyric? Like what emotion did it evoke? That's kind of crazy. Like that's kind of
pretty heavy.
Do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pretty big pretty big shift from what we were used to, because we're, everyone knows that at this point, probably, who's seen our videos, that they're lighthearted and real silly. And we've said it plenty of times, like everybody in the band knows that the lyrics are much darker than the content of our videos.
Yeah.
But that doesn't...
fun. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I think is totally fine. I think it's a good little contrast, because I think we talked about this before, probably, that you're contrasting the fact of darkness in everyone's life with the fact that there's also a lot of lightness, and that those two coexist regularly. But I don't think that anybody had ever really like fully acknowledged the content of the darkness before. It was just like, oh yeah, the lyrics are pretty dark and the videos are lighthearted, because we just joke around generally. And so this is the first time that all of us had to confront the fact that, oh yeah, the shit is actually
it's
really
kind of heavy.
Dark. Sometimes it's really
different kind
dark.
of heavy.
Exactly.
Not the kind of heavy you might expect, but a kind of heavy nonetheless.
Yep. So, but to have, go ahead.
No, please, by all means, continue thought.
It was just I think I probably already said it, but just the idea that suddenly the focus was entirely on the heaviness of the lyrics and the darkness of that, and like that, I've never thought of our band as being like lyrically driven. It's, like I said, I write lyric stream of consciousness usually a month after we've already recorded the song, or like, oh, I have to record vocals today, I guess I should probably write some lyrics to this song. So it was an upside down approach.
Did you, knowing that you were going to have to do that, did it change your approach to it any? Meaning, did you listen to anything musically or kind of like take inspiration, or sort of like see like, well, how do they do it? Like, I don't know, like a Leonard Cohen, or more like lyrical artists that maybe don't work in your genre, but kind of do approach it that way, and kind of just see, how do they do it?
Yeah. I did, although not based on lyrical content or lyrical approach. It was actually more about since we were thinking about putting the vocals on before we ever even got to the studio, I actually started just listening to a lot of more just traditional pop arrangements for how do you build the vocals on a song. And it was like, okay, just started kind of writing down formulas, and lots of times it's like chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, or like whatever. So just trying to structure. It was more about structure than it was content.
Like getting the lab coat on and just almost
exactly
diagnosing, okay, how did he get from point A to point B here?
Yeah, totally.
Well, and when I jumped in before, I just wanted to say, I think that's that record probably has some of John's finest moments. Like some of the drumming stuff on there is really good. I'm not that he's any slouch, obviously. He's always pretty badass, but like that's some of his finest hours, I think, are on that record. Also, it feels like it'd be disingenuous to not talk about the Predator video that's on.
Yeah.
Which is a favorite of mine, of all your very entertaining videos. Like most dudes my age, I have a certain soft spot for an action era, and that is like one of my favorites. So
absolutely.
Did that come like as it was Whitey just like, okay guys, we're gonna do Predator, or is it more just did they kind of get snuck in? Like how did that video come to pass? Because again, we're talking about kind of like heavy content for the record, but it's like the videos are more entertaining. We've established that.
I think, if I remember right, that actually may have been Brian's idea initially, and like from a long time ago. But that I could be wrong. I mean, he's had a number of different, just like rough video ideas. It may have been that he had more of like a what's that Joseph Conrad book that?
Heart of Darkness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like an apocalypse. No, Heart of Darkness is the book, but then like Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now is the movie, and then they did the documentary that's Hearts of Darkness.
Right, exactly. It may have been that, but in any case, yes, that video was felt like one of the bigger productions that we did, just because we had to do so much stuff on this guy. Kai is the guy's name. He donated he has a bunch of property out in sort of like Central Oregon, and is like a special effects and like stunts guy. So it was super fun, like just driving down there, and I think we got a hotel and like did 2 full days of shooting out in his woods. But yeah, I mean, I felt a little bit like I put my bossy hat on for a second because I was determined to be the guy that had the minigun, the like Jesse the Body Ventura.
Of course, yeah.
I was like, I gotta. If I can have any moment in any video, that's the one that I gotta have.
Call dibs. That's the move, man.
Exactly.
I was under the mistaken impression that miniguns were a standard accoutrement for many years because of that movie. Whereas like,
right.
people like, that would not be the case.
No, not at all. No, there's no way. Those are mounted on helicopters usually.
Yeah, there's no way that would work. Yeah, I'm like, oh, it looks cool in the movie. That's the important thing. Yeah, and that one, you know, there's it's pretty rad. Like, you know, you've got a lot of like you got the meme, they got the handshake,
yes.
like
yeah,
which I was so glad when that became a meme. I was like, finally a meme format I like.
Right.
But I mean, it's but to a certain degree, it's also a far cry from like Prehistoric Dog or something, right? You're going out to a location and like acting in a way, like which is kind of nuts. In the same way that you're like, oh, the lyrics have to be done before we record the record.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are all kind of changes that are. Granted, the band has grown to a level that it makes sense for it, but it is a little bit different. Was there any kind of growing pains with that, or did it seem like you guys were just ready at that point for that kind of stuff?
I think that in both cases, there was a pretty natural progression. It felt like a natural progression from our end, and I feel like that's sort of been the theme of the band from the start, is that none of it is like almost everything has felt like a fairly natural progression is not necessarily even the right word, but like everything that we've done has felt like, oh, this is just what makes sense at the time. So whether it's the way we write songs right now, you know, or the way that the songs sound, the style of the songs we're writing just make fit for what is going on in our lives right now. And there have definitely been points at which we've had to, put the kibosh on certain things. And I can't really think of any examples right now, but there are a few, it's the job of our manager to present any type of ideas. And she does a fantastic job she's very, very active and comes up with lots and lots of suggestions. And some of them were like, that's not our style. We can't do that. So,
I mean, are there things like, hey, Rolaids wants to use something in their ads or something along?
I think Rolaids would actually be a pretty good one based on our.
Now that as I said it aloud, I was like, actually, that one wouldn't be so bad. Get some antacids. Hell yeah,
Right. But
the road is harsh on the stomach.
Yes, exactly. The beige buffet can really wreak havoc on your digestive system. But no, I mean, it's lots of times it's even just stuff about like, would you guys want to do like a paid meet and greet kind of thing before a show? And we're just like, no, that's not our style. I'll just go hang out by the merch table and just say hi to people after the show and just meet them like a normal person, which is what I am. So it's more stuff like that. The stuff that like you could easily feel like the transition from like, oh, now we're, recording in this very professional studio and we're doing these videos with a real budget and like like catering and or craft services, as they call it, and all that kind of stuff. And it like, I feel like you could easily fall into the sort of like that, oh, we're now we're like a product. And so let's start selling every part of that product, which is totally fine for plenty of people. It's just that we don't feel comfortable with that stuff, so we just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of more, like the arena rock world and that disconnect, that separation, the purposeful separation between audience and artist, which is not to say one way or the other which is superior, but when you're coming from the world of punk rock, I think there's a somewhat amount of natural disdain to be like, that's not for us. That's
yeah, it just doesn't feel, it feels real unnatural to us because like you said, we have more of that punk ethos of just like, we're the guys that were standing in the audience a second ago and now we're on stage, and then we'll be standing in the audience right afterwards too.
It almost I saw Mike Watt in a documentary talking about like taking turns being on stage, like and like he had a real, I have to paraphrase it because it was years ago, but he's talking about, a lot of people, the arena rock bands, like audiences down here, and they're like looking up to the arena, but like world I come from, you're on the same level. You're just taking turns being. I was like, oh man, that's some deep stuff, Mike Watt. Right on.
Mike Watt said something insightful and smart.
Yeah. That's just it.
He has a very interesting perspective on the whole punk world.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a
great
treasure.
I felt very honored to have him on the show, and I felt very proud that I kept him on task.
Yeah.
He's a hard dude to wrangle. That mine's going a mile a minute, and it's like, oh my god, okay, go back to this. All right. So anything else with Only Ghost before we move on to Arrows with the deep dive? I feel like that's I don't want to give short shrift to it. It's obviously a huge part of your musical career. Anything else that we're not getting to? I think that's pretty good from my perspective. But
yeah, I think it's pretty good from everyone's perspective. So yeah. I do want to acknowledge, though, just now in real life that that doing a destination, well, a couple things. One, I have to give thanks again to Ross, because like I said, we were actually scheduled to only do 2 weeks, and he pretty quickly realized like we can't make the record that he feels like we need to make unless we do a whole month. And he was like, I know you guys don't have the budget to pay me anymore, but we're just going to do it. We're going to take a month. And he worked
That's awesome.
12-hour days for 30 days straight on that record. So he is a total animal. He's a monster. He's awesome. And then I also want to acknowledge just all of our people in Portland back home who were very supportive of us and kept the dogs fed and kept my son fed and watered.
Right.
That you can't do a 30-day record like that without and same thing for touring, without support from people back home. So thanks to them.
You keep the home front from burning to the ground while you're going out and making your magnum opus.
Yes.
That's probably the only record that you've ever made like that, right? Where there's that much time to concentrate on it.
Yeah.
Did you feel like, and I'm just going to, I've always said with tour, there's a certain amount of like, you get like your sea legs after, it's usually about a week or so that like you're out to sea now and like stuff kind of changes. And there's another change that happens like a little bit further on, somewhere between like 4 to 5 weeks, so on and so on.
But did you get your sea stomach where you're like, okay, I'm ready to go home.
But did you get like recording legs in that way? Like, did you feel like out to sea with recording at all with
I feel pretty comfortable in the studio. So I felt like it was just like after, one day we're already fine. It was just settling into it. Ross just made us feel so comfortable that, and that area of, Venice Beach had so many options for like, it's easy to go find food over here and to get coffee over here. It's just like everything was super easy. And so there was like
clear.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, his house is beach on. I mean, you walk out the door and you cross the boardwalk and you're on the beach. So it was hard to feel uncomfortable there.
I remember, and this is going to be a dumb story because I don't remember the details of it, but John from Akimbo and Sandwriter had a pretty good story about Ross Robinson's place that I think he told on his show. I unfortunately can't remember a single detail of it, so I probably shouldn't have brought it up. But it's great. The thing that
I just saw Sandwriter on Thursday. It was the first show that I've attended since since the lockdown. And of course, then it turns out that one of the what's that?
I said since the troubles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's I saw pictures of it. I was like, yes, that's awesome.
Yep.
Love those dudes. Why don't we tear into arrows?
Yes.
So what I'd like to
do
do here is so first of all, it's rad. I think it's amongst your best, personally, from my perspective. I think that it definitely rewards repeat listenability. There's a lot of interesting aspects for how you guys approach the songs, almost kind of a more noisy perspective for some of it. That I thought some of them were like kind of interesting decisions that for a record for a band that's been around that long, like I thought it was kind of ballsy in a way to make a record like this. So what I want to do is let's hit all the songs, and if you can, give me a little insights into whether it's the arrangements, lyrics, any thoughts you might have, the recording process, anything about the specific songs and how it sits where it is, anything that springs to mind, and we'll just go through. Give each one its little time in the sun. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great. As long as you're not bored by me talking about this stuff, then
no. Like I said, I think it's a ripper, man. It's cool. It's one of my favorites of the year so far, and I'm a hard dude to please. So
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So it starts off with "Take It Back."
Yes. So this one was a track that Brian had demoed just by himself at home. It was pretty gothic sounding. I think he just played guitar and then octaved it down. That's a new verb I just invented.
I think that pedal.
Yeah. And I loved it. I was like, let's just put this on the record as is. But, we were in a studio. So Chris and David and Brian recorded re-recorded it in the studio. And then what you're hearing on the record is actually this, I think it's the second half of the song. Because one of the original ideas we had, maybe it's just the first half, I can't remember how we ended up doing it, but Chris had an idea for the sequence bookending the record with Take It Back, have it start in the second half and fade out, and then have it fade in and play the first half at the very end, which I thought was a rad idea. Yeah. But it didn't work just time-wise. So, but I love starting the album with that song because it's so, we have fallen into the same pattern that, Metallica did a thing where it's every record has a pretty, their sequence seemed to be kind of the same. You could just substitute out the different songs. Right. You know what I mean?
They have the same type of song in each slot.
Exactly in the same slot. Yeah. And so a few of us were champions of let's fuck with people who are expecting us to do that again, because we've started the last several with a barn burner.
Here's the banger.
And then the sort of single comes next or whatever.
Yeah.
So I really liked the idea of starting off with something that just was what the hell is this? And then that kind of set the stage for the next song, for Unreal Estate, which is a track that the history of that one's kind of weird. So I wrote this real strange riff that was twice as fast as what you hear in that song. Mm-hmm. And the timing is just really, really strange. Yeah. And so we were practicing it way, way slower. And then we simplified the riff even more. So we got rid of all these sort of fiddly bits that were in the middle and we're okay, just for the sake of breaking it down for rhythmically, we're going to play just the little turnaroundy things and just chug out on the open D just to simplify it. And then once we did that and we made a demo of that, I was oh shit, this is actually way better than the fast fancy one. Actually kind of sounded it sort of sounded like this sort of weirdly looping thing that you may have heard on a Desert Sessions recording or something.
Sure. And there's something to be said for that for sure. But then also sometimes, you talked last time about, Brian coming in with some academic decathlon crazy riff and then using, use the first 4 notes of that, and that
Right. So that's kind of what happened with this one is that, and then I kind of built out that song in the computer.
Mhm.
I love the idea of just like the drums staying exactly the same the whole time because the accents are so weird, and then like doing stuff on the guitar that kind of like played off of that. We didn't end up keeping that. We ended up like having the drums kind of shift when the guitar solos came in. But yeah, that song was it's a tricky one to mix because it's got so many different layers of different things. And I played a bunch of the guitar solo, like the layered guitar solos on it. And there's like a bunch of wrong notes that are in there on purpose. But just trying to get the balance of that is kind of a trick. But that's like one of my favorite songs on the whole record, just the way that it develops. And it's essentially the same. I've had a goal in my mind since becoming totally obsessed with the band Federation X.
Yes.
Of
FedEx.
doing what
I almost wore a Federation X shirt today on this show.
Yes. They are, in my opinion, the best band that I'm familiar with at just playing the same riff and just making minor tweaks to it to build a song for 4.5 minutes or whatever it is. Like the whole song.
Surprise,
exactly.
Comfort. I mean, yeah.
Hatchet Man. They're all just like minor tweaks of the same riff the whole time, but just making it like more and more and more energy and radness. And so I've had like this personal goal for like 8 years to try to do something kind of like that. And I tried to do it a few times on this record. And that Unreal Estate is sort of like, I think the most successful version of that, though it sounds nothing like FedEx. It sounds more like...
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
It's just, I mean, structurally, but it sounds more like a Melvin song crossed with some sort of like, operatic Halloween music or something. Uh-oh, I got a frozen... I lost you for a sec.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I knocked into the thing there. I got too excited about it. Well, and to me, what I was going to say is, to me, it almost, without sounding anything like the Wipers, kind of evokes the same vibe of the Wipers, where, they would just have it, especially like, Youth of America, where just, just going for like forever and ever. You're like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? Something's going to happen, clearly. What's going to happen? And then you're like, oh, awesome. That, but while not at all sounding like the Wipers, but like evoking that tension, like almost like krautrock almost in that way.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because that's the original riff kind of had that it didn't sound like krautrock, but had that same sort of approach that I know that
Motoric is what that's called. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But that Joshua Homme, when he first started Queens of the Stone Age, he was like, I want to make something that does that thing. And then he said, only later did I discover that krautrock was that had been done in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like that original riff sort of had that same vibe to it. And so this is just a much slower, kind of more Melvin-y version of the same thing.
That's cool. I'm gonna next time I'm gonna think about that next time I listen to it, because I think that's in another epoch of Red Fang, it would be clear that would be like the opener, right? Like they wouldn't have the take it back in front of it, or even another song. But like I liked the kind of like to me it reminds me of like the way the album is sequenced. Kind of reminds me more like a 90s like Unwound or like Harp or something, where it's you don't necessarily have like nowadays everything's got to be like, okay, hardest banger first immediately, catch their attention. Like it's sort of, it's like we're gonna do what we want, and like at this point you're probably gonna be along for the ride, so just strap in, bucko, let's do this.
And if people are going to if they're listening to an album, we don't, we're not putting out 10 singles, we're putting out an album. So if you want to listen to the album, this is how it is probably best absorbed, is the way that we tried to perfect it as a whole. So yeah, next one is
title track
Arrows, right? Which is a song that that main riff I'd written, I don't know, like 3-4 years ago or something. I mean, the record we recorded in 2019, so I think I'd written that riff in probably like 2017 or something, and just was banging my head against the wall about how to make it sound like, put the right other things with it. Like I just couldn't figure out what the second riff was or what the chorus was going to be or anything. And we kept trying these different things, and I was like, yeah, it's okay, but it's just, I know that it can be better. And that one I was like really thinking about the song. There's 3 songs that strongly influenced that one. One is Heavy Shoes by Big Business, which is one that I think Scott sings on. It's on that.
Is that the quadruple single? Is that, or the
No, it's the only record that he was on. Not mine.
I'm trying to remember now too. Hold on, I'll
we got to look it up because this is embarrassing.
I was good. I'll just cut this out so we both look way smarter.
Yeah.
Because I should know this too, and I'm.
Yeah. It's on. Oh, Battlefield's Forever.
Battlefield's Forever. That's right. By the way, I know there was a Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin movie called Big Business.
I do remember that movie actually.
It's on Disney Plus. Curious. I don't know.
Okay. Right. Watch it right after Marley and Me.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know which one would make me cry more.
Yeah.
So it was like that, the spirit of that song with sort of like, I was trying to also get the vocal approach came from a combination of 2 songs. One was I'm gonna have to look up what the song is actually called, but do you know the band Dead Now?
Yeah, Andrew's band, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we did a tour with them, and this one particular song was just like, oh, this is the perfect kind of like general idea of how I want the vocals to sound. But it didn't really, I was trying to actually just like, sometimes I'll just take another vocal line and just sing it over my riff. Yeah. And then just modify it. But it just didn't work at all. I'm trying to find which song it was, but whatever. It's a Dead Now song.
We'll see. So it's got Richie Blackmore, which I love that.
Yes.
Early.
It's Power Shapes.
Power
is
Shapes.
the one. Yeah.
That.
So listen to that song and you'll be like, oh, okay, I see. But then the last one was a band from Portland called Menomina.
I don't think.
They're way more of a pop band. They're like, for a long time, it was just these 3 dudes, and they would like write
like that. The Muppet, the Menomina.
Exactly. That's where their name came from. I'm pretty sure. But they would like write songs by they were all computery literate, whatever. And so they would just like send ideas back and forth. They would write songs in their computers just by like, hey, I came up with this drum part. And then somebody would layer over some keyboards, and then they'd send it on, and then the next person would put some saxophone on it or whatever. So,
sure.
But the song that I stole the vocal line from is, I can't remember, but it's a Menomina song. Right. Like, it's 5 Little Rooms is what it's called.
Cool.
Which is also a great song. So that was one of those ones where I'm going on at length, but essentially that one was one that I was just beating my head against the wall and could not figure it out. And then one morning I woke up at I was going through this bout of I have morning insomnia, not night insomnia. So I'll wake up at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning and then just can't go back to sleep. As my dad has the same thing. And so I was up at 4 and I was like, well, I can't go back to sleep. So I just went to the studio and then just started basically physically attacking the song and just busted out. I had a drum, some practice recording. I just put that on and then I just played more bass parts over it. I made up the intro, made up all the lyrics and the, vocal line and just did it all in one, insomnia morning. and then layered on all the guitars and everything. So that one was just like a completely finished product that I demoed by myself one morning at 4:30 a.m.
Free
and
of
then we just exactly, and then we just like but it took like 4 years to get there, and then once it was done, we just took it in the studio. We just learned the parts and just recorded it.
Slight sidebar. And Andrew, definitely friend of the show. Of Dead Now. There was a Tilt song that was the theme song for Protonic Reversal for like I think the first 47 along those lines. But yeah, I'll love to Andrew. We love Andrew. And I'll love to taking advantage of insomnia moments to be creative, because otherwise you just sit, well, I guess I'm awake now.
Yeah, exactly.
So that one was sitting for a bit before you. But and then did you have the idea that like, hey, this should be with this grouping, or was it like you knew that should be on the record immediately?
To me, I just because I labored over it for so long, and it felt like a pretty catchy song right off the bat. It was like this,
good.
It just, I don't know, and it's in B. All of the singles that I sing on, they're always in the key of B. It turns out.
Oh, interesting. So
Prehistoric Dog,
not the tuning.
Wires. Though. What's that?
They're in the key of not the tuning.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, you're not Kowloon Walled City. Come on.
No.
So that's interesting. So you always kind of gravitate towards that. Is that just like where you're comfortable singing, or like where you just?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just my vocal range is just perfect for that key. That's essentially what it boils down to. I have a pretty narrow range, and so it works really well right there. It's okay in C, but not that great. But B is the best. Yeah, and I've noticed that watching other bands, like even watching Sandrider the other night and seeing Helm's Ali a million times, that whenever bands just sit on that B chord, that's like I don't know if it's amps or what it is, but that feels like it's just the heaviest.
It's a happy
chord
story.
You can play. It's just so huge sounding. It always is.
Yeah, it's there's a special kind of I don't know, some music theorist, sure, I'm sure could break down why that is the case, but I've noticed that as
if you want it to be heavy, B and B.
Heavy. If you want it to be.
That's right. What's the next song? My Disaster.
A Disaster, yes.
Are you impressed that I know the sequence of our record?
I'm astounded because that means to me, and this is my theory, you probably spend a lot of time sequencing it, like thinking about it.
We thought about it a lot.
Because that's burning your brain for a while.
Yeah. My Disaster was one that I had this little riff that it sounds a lot like that band Status Quo.
Oh yeah.
There's a song. There's a song called "A Better Way" that John and David have wanted to cover for quite a while. And I've been sort of like listening to it because it's a rad song, and then I just wrote this riff that's like, oh, that kind of sounds like. I think our working title for that song was "A Worser Way," because it's really just like it's not. I mean, it's essentially just an odd time version of that same riff,
right? Yeah.
But it was like that song. Chris Funk came to one of our practices before we went into the studio. And while he was there, I was like, hey guys, can we just try this thing out? And it was like that riff. And then and then let's just move up to the C and hang out there for a second. And then just add this other thing of one of David's riffs. And we practiced it like 3 times and then never played it again. And we were in the studio and we're, been there for a few days. And I was like, oh, hey, we have some time. Maybe we should just bust out that song real quick. Yeah. And so we just, like 2 or 3 takes. And it was fine. And then we threw some vocals on afterwards and some guitar solos. And it's one of my favorite tracks on the record. But it was one that, like, I think that we spent a total of 20 minutes writing and recording that song.
But there's also something to be said for that melange of sort of a new wave song arrangement and sensibility type mixed with like the heaviness. Like there's something really cool about that. Again, sometimes some stuff comes a little easier than others, right? Some
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of those things that I was really trying to push. I think we all have been for years. It's just that it's been difficult for us to get over our own propensity or our own inclination towards nitpicking and perfectionism. So we have a tendency to way overthink stuff, and it's worked out for us in some cases. I feel like Arrows wouldn't have been the song that it was if I hadn't taken 3 years to write it. But then there's also songs that you do have to allow yourself to just be like, let's just see what comes out and just let it come out. Because it turns out that the greatest, what gives you the best chance for doing something of high quality is to do a huge quantity of things. So if you're trying to make a great song and you spend your whole life writing one song, chances are it's not going to be that good. Right. But if you're trying to write a great song and you write 10,000 songs, there might be like, maybe like 10 of them will be fucking amazing, or maybe one will be, just like transcendental, and then 15 of them will be pretty dang good. But if you only write one, the chances that it's going to be totally, knock it out of the park are pretty low.
I think back to that Tar song, "Good Part, Wrong Band."
That's awesome.
And then also, I mean, do you find yourself kind of doing the thing where you put a bunch of demos together and then you're like, oh, that's cool, but not maybe as cool as I thought it was when I recorded it, or like, hey, that part's awesome, the rest of this is okay.
And the other thing that often happens, I feel like, is that there's a thing that I'm like, oh, this is so rad, and then once you play it with everybody in the band, it changes. It always changes, and it's like, oh, it's not sounding the way I initially thought of it. And sometimes it's like, so I'm just going to let it go, and other times you just let the flow of the personality of the band you just have to let go of your pride and your like conception of what it is supposed to be, and just let it become what it is. And in some cases it gets worse, in some cases it gets better. So
it can go the other way, right? You can have somebody like, I got this thing, it's okay, and then you start playing, you're like, whoa, this is great.
Yes.
okay, that's the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
Too High is the next one.
So this is a track that that Brian came in with, that was, I think, mostly pretty much written. I think that the outro is the thing that we all kind of like, we worked on together. But that song, like as soon as we finished it, to me, it felt the most like an old school kind of Red Fang arrangement, and like everything just felt very much like, oh, this feels like the first record again. Feels like something we could have written for the first record. Maybe it's a little bit more fancy, but not much.
Definitely hits right down that line, though.
Yeah. The only thing that made me a little bit sad is that luckily you'll be able to hear this on the live stream thing that we're doing this Friday, I guess.
Yes.
That we actually have. There's a little bit of there's like a drum fill and drum break in the outro part that I love, that didn't make the record because we hadn't written it yet, and so it's much cooler. But we were trying to add it digitally in the recording. I was like, no, it just sounds way too fakey. So, but yeah, and I like that the outro to that one really reminds me of Helmet too, though, which I really like.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's bands have built entire careers sounding like that. But Anodyne. Anodyne
is, I have been very interested to see how many people are listing that as like one of their favorite tracks on the record, and it being like, they're like, oh, this sounds like an anthemic like arena rock song, because to me it sounds like it sounds a little bit tricky and weird, But
Mhm.
I guess that when you put all of the parts together, it boils down to something that as a whole piece is kind of like just drives along. So that was one that Brian came in with, the kind of bass part, which turns around in a weird way. It's like a 4-note pattern, but that it sort of like flips upside. I don't know how to describe it, but the one flips back and forth
Yeah, it's real subtle.
throughout
It's
this.
almost,
Yeah.
syncopate. Yeah, it's not really syncopation, but whatever. Again, music theorists will write.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like the cycle of it is pretty weird and rad, but then in the final version you don't really notice because it's just like rhythmically, like where the actual the pulses are stay even. It's just that where my finger is on the neck is like in a different place each time it comes around. So for our brains, it's like, well, this is kind of weird, semi-tricky song.
But to the rest of the world, it's a Red Fang song, all right,
Right, exactly. But that one was pretty much all Brian. David came up with some of the rad little squirrely squigglies. The thing that gave us trouble with that song was what was that?
I said the meadly bits. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That like the choruses for that one, when we were writing it, it was just sort of like, it was just those accents. It's like bow 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 whatever. But then there's just this sort of like chaos at the end of each line that to me, I was like, during practice, there's like, there's this inclination to sort of like nail down what was happening during those parts. And I was like, no, let's just leave it. Let's not write it. Let's just have it be chaos every time, that no one knows what's going to happen as long as we're coming back in on the beat. And I lost, but that's fine. I think that because what happened was, which I understand, like it's hard to, especially when you're going into a recording, to just let it be completely like no one has any idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
don't think of anything. Fuck.
Right. Right. Don't think of a fuzzy carrot right now.
Right. Like,
but I love the way that the sort of combination of everybody's different ideas for those parts all during the courses all kind of came together and created something that I actually think is super huge and kind of anthemic sounding. And then I also snuck in bass wise. One of my favorite songs of the last couple years is this Spoon song called "I Saw the Light."
Oh, sure, yeah,
Yeah, the second half of that song, this instrumental part, is very much like, I think that they must have been listening to that song "Remember" by John Lennon from Plastic Ono Band.
Yeah.
Because it has that same sort of like, the bass part I think is in 3, but then the drums are in 2.
Yep.
And it has this weird descending thing and so I was like, I'm totally ripping that off. So I did a similar descending bass part that I was like, yes, I got a Spoon bass line in to a Red Fang song.
That's awesome. Did you ever listen to A Series of Sneaks?
Oh, I don't know that one. No.
That was my introduction to them, and it basically, and it's a little more kind of gnarly than the later stuff. Like a lot of people kind of came in at Girls Can Tell and Kill the Moonlight and stuff like that, which are great.
Yeah.
But Series of Sneaks is like, some of these songs kind of sound like Wire or something.
Oh, rad.
Right? But then it ends with this incredibly like perfect pop song called Advanced Cassette. It's like, oh my God, this is like your elevator pitch for Spoon.
Right. I'm looking it up after this, after we're done.
You should check it. It's quite good, and I'm just shocked by how many people had never they don't know from it, because that's back when. I mean, that band has a storied history of their A&R guy totally screwed them, and this and that, and so a lot of people kind of didn't like. Girls Can Tell was like okay, we're doing this, we're getting back on the horse, and that's kind of where a lot of people came in with it. But yeah, I mean, to this day I say that record's incredibly underrated, and just.
Tell me the name of it again.
The Spoon record.
Yeah,
it's the one I just said it a minute ago. What
of Sneaks? Something.
A series of sneaks. SNEAKS. Series of sneaks instead of a series of snakes.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you should. I anytime I know anyone is into Spoon, and it's their second record. I was oh, do you know a series of sneaks? Because that's really good.
Yeah.
Cool. So Interrupt Mod.
Yeah. That's like probably the most straightforward Red Fang song on the record.
Yeah.
It's just like a, regular old rock song. It's 4 on the floor. No, it's named after, it was just, it's an interlude. It was named after, I think, the keyboard that we used on it. I was gonna say, it sounds like a piece of gear. Yeah.
yeah,
it was. It's the name of the piece of gear that we used because Chris Funk often records like lots of just weird little. He's like, "Oh, that's cool. That thing you're doing on guitar, David. Let me record a loop of you doing that, and then we'll throw on some other keyboards and stuff like that." That was like I think it was maybe even just Chris and John playing. I don't remember who played the keyboard on that. So I was probably out buying smoothies when they were doing that one. So I don't know a ton about it, but it sounds cool.
And that one leads into the song title that never fails to make me laugh, Fonzie Scheme.
Yes. That was one that one day, I don't know what was happening. I was just like, went to the practice space by myself and tuned my bass way down and just kind of started fucking around with, I think I was just messing around with, I had just gotten my Super Fuzz pedal back. The very first distortion pedal I ever bought, I was, 15 or 16 or something, and I bought a Super Fuzz at the little guitar store in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I think I was just messing with different amps and that pedal. And I was like, this needs to just be, I was thinking of Thrones, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I was like, this needs to be lower. And so, so that one was a relatively quick composition as far as just the skeleton. It took some, there was some labor that went into figuring out exactly what the second part was going to be. That went through a bunch of different forms, but it was a lot faster than like Arrows. And then the main thing of that, of course, that everybody notices is that there's, really good vocals. No. It's the strings.
Well, as a vocalist, I really felt that.
And that was the situation where I think it was Chris Funk. Well, I know it was Chris Funk, who we were not really sure how to deal with the second half of the song because I only had vocals for the first half. And we tried some guitar stuff and it just wasn't really working the way that we wanted it to. We needed something to stand out more sonically. And I think Chris had already been sitting on this idea for a while of broaching the idea of bringing in some strings. And at first, I think all of us were sort of like, it feels like maybe jumping the shark. But, I like a
record, which is like so like immediate and, almost sounds like cool 90s basement band for some of the stuff. Like the Baroque element of it just coming in like that is sort of like, I did not expect that.
Right.
Like
yeah. And I think it's weird though, because I feel like, we were, of course, we're not committed to putting it into the final mix.
Yeah.
So, once it only took a second to realize like, why not bring them in and just see what happens?
Yeah.
And they were super good musicians. There was a couple sisters who played viola and violin, and they had everything like scored out and like printed out scores of what their parts were. But it was cool because I think it was just Brian and I who were there, and we would offer suggestions for, can you change this part? Can you do more of this thing? Or like do that repeating thing again here. And because they're actual real musicians, they would just like go scritch, scritch, scritch. And then they would just do it perfect the next take.
Right.
Instead of like, oh, well, I need, I'll have to practice that and figure it out and blah, blah, blah. I was just like, oh yeah, we'll rewrite that. And just next time we'll do it exactly how you just said.
Yeah.
And
rather
so we,
a little more like no.
Right. Exactly. Can you go just like more uppy on that part?
Maybe.
And yeah.
Hold on. Wait.
right.
I think patience off. Oh yeah, the intimate. Sure.
So it was super fun, like being able to work with them, and then the final version, I feel like it is surprising, but it also, because we had worked on the parts enough and like gotten comfortable with them.
Oh, it doesn't. It
Doesn't seem what?
Does not seem tacked on at all. It seems.
No. That's the thing, is that it's surprising because you never would expect strings to show up on a Red Fang song, and especially one that's just like this kind of heavy, like dirty, like drop A, whatever.
Yeah.
But because of how much attention we paid to it and how good those the string players were, and getting it mixed in there right, I feel like it makes perfect sense once you hear it. It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
It just is unexpected the first time you hear it.
That's awesome. So then Days Collide.
Another Brian track that he came in with that one. I think that was like the most fully realized song that he came in with. And his parts were already, like, I think he even had like a demo version of it where he had already had vocals on it and everything. There was, I think, a version where there was like a slightly different vocal harmony that I was like super into that didn't make the final cut. But yeah, that's like a pretty, it's pretty epic and sort of depressing song that has this sort of semi-triumphant, but more, I guess, I would say not triumphant as much as
Triumphant.
that sort of like middle part is what's the word for, not, I can't believe, words fail me the older I get, but where you're like raging against, whatever that sort of depression is. It's there's a really rad word for it that somebody knows. But he so
I've got the same. Fine.
Yeah, it happens more and more, especially when you spent the last 20 years like shaking your brain inside of your skull.
Right. As it turns out, yeah.
Yeah, turns out that it actually jumbles up all of the words in there pretty good. It's like there's a bunch of letters now.
It's all one big Burroughs cut up book in there.
Exactly. So, but and that was one that my perspective is usually on how did my part come about. But the bass part on that one was another one where I think John and I both were struggling with that song quite a bit because the guitar was very well established on that the main opening riff. It's like real simple and sparse and doesn't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
But we're used to writing, or at least hearing, riffs from Brian that are very, very directed and full. They're like full of activity, and it's like, okay, well, there's this weird, it turns around weird here, and there's this accent here, so I'm just going to play to that and just make that, or play off of that or whatever. And this is just sort of like blank slate sort of guitar part, which he rarely comes up with. So it took me and John a while to figure something out, and then I eventually came upon that little sort of like moving bass line thing that I really liked, and only realized much, much later that it is, I'm gonna forget, but it's a Dr. Dre and Snoop song.
Really? Okay, I did not get it. Okay, I'm gonna have to.
I'll look it up later, but it's not exactly the same notes.
Right.
But it's like, there is a Dr. Dre song that if you go listen to it, it's doom, 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 doom. It's basically the same thing. It's almost exactly the same bass part. That I was just like, I was doing dishes and sorry, I was doing dishes and just had the stereo going, and I was like, wait a minute, oh, that's where I stole that song from. Yeah.
As long as I was gonna say, as long as you don't put a skit after it, I think it's fine.
Right.
Remember that when that was a thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I put skits on, home recordings back in the 90s.
Sure. And there's good examples of it. See average. How were the games this evening?
Yep, exactly. Which is from the Longmont tapes I learned later. It's not.
Oh, is it really?
It's not them. It's just totally lifted from some prank call tape.
Well, that's one of these days I'm gonna have John on, so I'll talk at length about that. I won't talk about everything. So that's okay. So that's that one, and then Rabbits and Hives is
yes.
Yeah.
That was one that David had written that riff. He basically wrote that whole song. It was just a two-part song.
Yeah.
And I loved it from the beginning. I think actually the whole band, I was like gone from practice one day, like 5 years ago. They wrote it just like that sort of like the opening riff has that kind of like weird turnaround thing. And we kind of futzed with it a little bit. And they had kind of like come up with what they felt like was the most optimal version of that. And I was like, yes, that's awesome. And I loved the way it went into that second like part that the feel is so different. And I remember having some sort of conversations about, does it make sense to do it like this? Because it really just feels like we're just we're gluing together two totally separate songs.
Oh, I got this riff, bro. Oh, I got this riff, bro. Yeah,
exactly. But I actually loved it. Like, I love the contrast. I mean, it sort of reminds me a little bit of, for some reason, of Suicidal Tendencies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can get
not sonically, but just that sort of like we're playing this like fast thing and then just break down, and without any sort of like. But Black Sabbath did the same thing too. They would just totally shift gears partway through a song, and it was awesome.
Fairies wear boots, man.
Exactly. So that's one of those.
It's not a wizard. Oh shit! It's a wizard.
Right. Exactly. So I was like, I don't think that there's necessarily it's not a crime to do that kind of thing. And so let's just see what happens. So it was another one of those, like, let's just record it and just see how it sounds. And it's so short and easy. And I think it turned out great. I love it. I was very happy that we did it.
You guys have a few of those kinds of songs over the various records. What's is there any kind of Red Fang ethos to song length? Because I'm always fascinated when a band can like pull off like doing something. Like the perfect example is like the Residents commercial album or something, right? But like when somebody can pull off like, oh no, that's really a song, not like, Torch. Very good at that as well.
Yes.
I mean, when I think of Red Fang, usually what I'm thinking of is like, you got a cool riff and you're kind of laying into it and it does the thing for a while, then it kind of shifts to something else. But every once in a while you have these just kind of quick little, like, I already invoked Wire once, so I'll invoke it again, like Wire-esque, like little tidbits that's like, wow.
Yeah, like a snack, a song snack.
Snack. That's good.
And, well, there's like in Europe especially, but you're starting to have them over here too. They have those they're like 6-ounce bottles of beer or something. And maybe it's not 6, they're tiny.
Okay.
Maybe they're like 8 ounces or something.
Yeah, we super stop here, brother.
Yeah, but we call them snack beers.
That's hilarious. Oh, I've seen those. Yeah, you're right. I totally like redacted them from my memory until you mentioned that.
But yeah, so those are sort of like snack songs or something. But we have had discussions about, there's different camps. My thought is, I don't care at all how long the song is. It just should be the right length to feel like a song. Like if you have a song, we've had songs that were 1 minute long that felt like the idea was completed. Yeah. And any longer it would have been a waste. Actually, one of my favorite songs was, or short songs was, I think it was for Murder the Mountains that we did a song called Pawn Everything. I don't think it made it it was like an outtake, but it's just this real short, like real straightforward punkish, vibe. And the song is 1 minute long. And then there's an entire minute of feedback at the end and just noises. So just like the noise and feedback thing is as long as the and I love that because I just love like who gives a shit, like it doesn't have to be, perfect 2.5 minute long pop songs every time.
Yeah, there's no rule.
No, exactly. For me it's like the rule is, does it make sense as a song? at this length. If it makes sense as a song in 34 seconds, that's great. And if it makes sense as a song, my wife is heading up to practice right now.
Oh, okay.
As a 20-minute long song, then that's what it is. So I mean, I love Yob, and I love the Descendants. So we try to write songs that are right in the middle.
Timely, did you listen to the new Descendants thing that came out? There's a I can't remember the guy before Stephen Edgerton, the the one with all the really angry songs, like the really confrontational early songs.
Yeah,
they released a record this week. That's all that guy. I'm gonna get so much hate mail if I don't remember that dude's name. You know what I'm talking about? Like the first guitar player.
I don't remember his name, but I do know what you're talking about.
That band made way more sense to me when I finally saw that documentary. Because of course, like, as a kid, I'm like, I don't know what these guys even look like, except for the singer, because he's on the cover.
Right.
Frank Nevada.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's called Ninth and Walnut, and
cool. I'm looking it up.
It's pretty rad, and like the fact that that came completely out of nowhere, I was like, oh wow, huh, okay, that's cool. Anyway, having nothing to do. So and you said the word Descendant, so that made me think of that because they've been in my mind. Why?
Okay, so this one has a little bit more of a story behind its development.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I don't know, a long time ago, a buddy of mine in Portland, he worked for a music house as a composer, and the music house he worked for were asked to put together a compilation of bands covering songs from Fraggle Rock to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the show.
That's awesome. I love that show when I was a kid.
Me too. And he asked me if Red Fang would want to do, there's a song that like the Trash Heap sang that was sort of just like this like dirty blues song or whatever. And I was like, I would love to do a song from that show, but that particular song just feels way too on the nose and just kind of like, it would just be kind of dumb sounding, I think, if we had done it.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I want to do this, but I have no idea what other song we would possibly do. And I was just kind of like flipping through episodes and just it was like the very first one that I pulled up and started watching had a song called Why on it, which is like this real introspective kind of weird song that one of the girl Fraggles sings about like, why do doozers do the things that they do? And,
oh yeah. I remember.
And so we covered it. We made a like full-fledged cover of that song, but that album kind of like didn't really, I feel like Henson's production company was not as stoked on it as they wanted to be. And so I feel like it just kind of like was like, with that record. So it kind of didn't, I mean, a few people have heard it, but not many. And we've always loved that song and arrangement. It's pretty different from some of our other stuff, but it's actually a like acoustic guitar song that I wrote with my old, like as my old band in the 90s was fizzling out. I just had kind of come up with that thing. And a friend of mine, Derek Oringer, I always say his name wrong and I apologize. He came up with like drums and bass for it, which actually, and another little guitar part, which I stole to put onto our version. Sorry, Derek, but I actually talked to him about it. He's fine. But yeah, that was like, and so I just kind of took a simplified version of this late 90s song that I'd written, dumbed it down, and then kind of rewrote the melody of this Fraggle Rock song. And then I rewrote the lyrics for the record to, so that it's lyrics that were more specifically about my life and, that were not just the lyrics from a Fraggle Rock song anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
And for the outro of that song, we had to go talk about Days Collide for a second, because Days Collide has that really long kind of looping, epic outro thing.
Yeah.
Which is something that I feel like we do on it, at least one song per Red Fang record.
It's the law.
It's the law. And so we were discussing whether or not we were going to do the same sort of thing for Y, because it feels like that outro should go on for a long time. But I was like, well, the original version, it stops right away, and I kind of like that it does. That's how I wrote it, in 1998.
Yeah.
Partly because it is very obviously just a rewrite of that Beatles song. Is it While My Guitar Gently Weeps? The long outro to that song.
Oh yeah, and then it just
down, 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 do, do, do,
sure.
do,
Yeah.
down, 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 down. I'm fuzzing out, aren't I? But you know what I'm talking about. And then it just cuts off all of a sudden.
It's like,
and every band in the 90s like rewrote that outro for one of their songs. Brian was like, "Oh yeah, I did that too." That's not the right song. Wrong song title, but you know what song I'm talking about.
Well, and the next song after it is real delicate and kind of,
yes.
Fucking hell.
This is what happens to you when you are almost 50.
This is the I call the show Rock and Roll Dudes Googling stuff.
Exactly. Oh, She's So Heavy. Yeah, She's So Heavy.
Yeah. That's and the one after that is Here Comes the Sun.
Yes. It's funny because what's so stupid about this is that the demo version of that song I actually just called She's So Heavy because that was the the reference. For me to forget both songs with the same name is pretty special.
That's fantastic.
But I partly because I just I'm kind of an asshole sometimes the way I like to, I used to sing the Star Spangled Banner in the shower, and then I would stop before the last note just because it's aggravating, to not resolve. And so I like the idea of that song, like evoking the outro of She's So Heavy. And you're like, oh yeah, this is the thing. It's like built to be looped, and then to have it just go twice and stop. It's like, what? Oh,
yeah. Andy Bernard from The Office would be freaking out.
Right. But leave him wanting more. But also, it's just like a tight pop song.
Play the song again.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Owl.
That one was another Brian track that has a sort of like old school Red Fang feel to it for the first half of it. And it just is like totally trucking along. This one was like pretty hard for us to figure out how to arrange it properly because it really is just like there's a lot of, at least from our perspective, the final version you kind of can't really tell. As we were writing it, there's a lot of like disjointed stuff that doesn't seem to fit together. And so trying to make it all flow properly was actually really, really hard. I feel like the end result is like, oh, what? It doesn't sound like that at all, which is a testament
Sounds
to
like
how hard we work.
Right.
No. It's a testament to luck and perseverance, and that Adam, the engineer of this track, of the whole record, he was just like, I know what you guys are talking about. I feel that same thing, that it's like all these parts need to be in there, but they're not flowing right. And so he just stayed late one night and just did an edit of the song of all the parts. And it was like, this part that you have going in here for like a really long time needs to happen later and for only this long. And like cool. This part, and like he just sort of like cut it all together. And we're like, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly the way it needs to be. And so, and then the outro part, the second half of the song, Funk helped us a lot with like building how to get into that from, because there's that kind of big stop.
So how do you get it from point B, right?
Exactly. And so we had like vague ideas, but he was just like, okay, here's what he really like helped us a lot with laying out the structure for that end part. But then I was like really, really, really into the idea of having my bass part line up with John's drums and have the accents from before line up with this new guitar part, because it was like disjointed, but if you hear it enough times, then it starts to make sense. So the outro to that song like is pretty fucking weird when you're trying to write it. And I feel like it probably, I don't know, I'd be curious what your impression was the first time you heard the second half. It was just like, this doesn't make any damn sense. Or
I mean, it's something I actually didn't notice until the second or third time I listened to it, and then I was like, oh, that's a little no means no there. That's interesting. Like, and that was it, because the thing is, the flow doesn't change, like the song. So you have to kind of be almost like not looking out for it, but like almost trying to like just what did I not hear this last time? And I was like, oh, that's kind of was that always doing that? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
As opposed to it being a very pronounced like, oh, it's doing the thing. We're doing the thing, everybody.
Right.
We're doing the thing.
Exactly. So yeah, we don't like beat you over the head with it, but yeah, I just love. But then the other thing that happened was that I don't know if it was intentional or accidental, that while Adam was editing it, the drums on the outro ended up actually getting shifted over.
Oh, interesting.
So the beat actually it's the exact same beat, but it just starts in a different place. It's like right before it starts going faster again, right before the drums kick in going faster, they go like kind of like they're shifted over like 3 beats or something. So it's exactly the same, but instead of starting on the 1, well, what was the 1? Everything else stays the same. It's just the drums move over.
Funny. Okay,
and
now
so
all right.
It's pretty awesome. Like from our perspective, it's like, whoa, that is cool. And then we ended up like trying to figure out some way to play it live, because we played it at this show that we just did.
Yeah.
And messed around with it. And it was like, oh, we actually just have to do it the way that Adam cut it together.
Right. That's
in the computer.
Sense. Yeah.
That's why it works, is because it's weird in the specific way. And so we just learned that. And so that's one of the songs that we actually never played that song.
Right.
Until a year and a half after we recorded it. And we didn't even play the version that you hear on the record, because it's, drum edits and whatever. So,
yeah.
But
go ahead. Yeah. I was going to say that's a perfect example of having an outside party in the room. How can make an integral difference.
Yes.
Because again, someone that especially understands you and is like, oh no, I think I get where you're going for this, but you have an unconnected series of islands and we need an archipelago here.
Absolutely. And that was actually getting back for a second to working with Ross. One of the things that's really helpful and instructive and cool and interesting about the way he does things. He's like, part of the philosophy behind coming in and standing in the room with you while you're playing through your songs is he's like, it just makes you hear your own songs way differently if there's someone else in the room who's not actively playing. They like, you suddenly just like, you start to see things through their eyes also. And you start evaluating and you're like, oh, actually this part that I thought was super cool, now that I am thinking about someone else hearing it, it's like, oh yeah, that actually doesn't make any sense. So I think those are sort of similar ideas.
That's like the Heisenberg effect.
Yes.
Right. The act of absorbing something changes it. Which is that's very much a only play the first 4 notes reading of Heisenberg, but that's fine.
Right. Sure. Yeah. That's good enough for some brain dead rockers.
Yeah, exactly. That's good enough for this. That's a good, go listen to your Feynman lectures, you nerd.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. I like that. And then, of course, so you close out the whole the proceedings with the funeral coach.
Yeah, which is one that we've actually, the first time we ever tried to record that song was with Chris Funk when we were doing Murder the Mountains. So the first time we tried to record it was in 2009. And it was like it was a big part in the middle of another song. But that's a riff that Brian wrote in probably 2006 or something.
Like Murder Mountains kind of era, like around that, like getting back. Okay.
Yes, he wrote that opening riff a very long time ago, and we have all of us have always loved that riff, but just could not figure out what to put it, what to pair it with. It just never worked in any context. And because anything that we kind of like paired with that riff would just like, it would take away from that riff, And so I think we did the best that we could. I think that somebody else probably could have done a better job, but that's one of those ones where there was like a folder in I have like all of the archives of all of our old riffs in folders all over the place on my computer. And that one has by far the most number of like, here's the OG, here's a slightly modified, here's the third, modified number 2, number 3, whatever. And then like 25 different things that we've tried along with the original riff.
Right.
And so I literally just like put all of them into a Reaper session and just moved them around and was like, what are the best? Let's just take the best ones. And I just built it out from all the different versions we've done in the past, and then ended up with what you hear, which is like, probably good enough, but at least it's done now.
Right. And just speaking to the earlier point, like there's sometimes we just have to respect the primacy of the riff itself. Like,
Yes.
would Boris be a better song with some Guitar Center bros shredding over it? No, it would not. Like that would be terrible. Please don't do that.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, I think there's, again, for a band that is very comfortable in its own voice and comfortable with its strengths, the fact that you can recognize, like, okay, maybe that's not the time for that to boogie necessarily, or
right.
maybe that is the time for it to boogie. Like, who knows? Like,
yeah. And
like, I'm not pro or anti boogie, to be clear, but I'm just saying.
Right. And I think also with that that kind of gets back to that song, sort of gets back to that like quantity over quality thing or whatever, that focusing on quantity is actually what's most likely to get you to quality.
Right.
That was one of those ones that we belabored that song for 12 years or something.
Right.
And could have probably just, we could have pooped it out a lot faster. Like I like it and I'm happy with the way it turned out, but I don't think it needed 12 years to get to the, to be like, it's fine. It's not like, it's clearly not, a all-time, great song of ours or of anybody's. It's like, fine. And I love that riff. And as long as that riff is out there, that's great. And, but yeah, my favorite part of that song, is the riff, of course, the opening riff, but then also, I'm pretty into the song title.
Yeah. Well, so first thing I want to say is that like not every song has to be a 5-star general, right? Exactly. They still can help you win the war, even if they're not the 5-star general, and that's okay.
Yes.
But evocative song title, like, that's another one. Fonzie Scheme in that one, I was like, oh, that's Funeral Coach. So what would that look like? That's hilarious. Well,
so Fonzie Scheme, I should give credit. John is the one who came up with the title for that, because we were riffing on it, and he was like, why does it sound, what's going on with this song? Because it sounds like a lot heavier than some of the other riffs or whatever. Or maybe I was talking to Brian and David about the fact that I'm tuned down to drop A. That doesn't mean that you guys have to tune to that, but that's why when you see me playing these frets, it sounds weird and different. And and so John was like, oh, we should call this song Fonzie Scheme because it's in A.
Comedic stylings of John Sherman. I like
That's
it.
Right. And Funeral Coach was one that, that's a much better, I should have ended with that one because that's a much better punchline.
Yeah.
But
you got
Funeral,
it.
Yeah. Well, just shift it around. I know you can't do it in the live version, but
I'll get my producers on it.
Yeah. Fonzie Scheme, I was like Funeral Coach, I was driving down the freeway and I saw a hearse that it was like Funeral Coach services. And I was like, That'd be really weird. It just immediately, just because that's what my brain does. Like I thought of a guy with a whistle around his neck.
Do they have a whistle? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Awesome.
really, you need coaches for that? I feel like people generally already kind of know how to feel, but so that was, I just couldn't get that image out of my head, and so I had to. It was just a working title, but then we stuck with it, and the song lyrics kind of make sense with it now too. So it worked out okay.
Yeah, it's like telling people to like run laps if they're not grieving correctly or something, you know.
Right,
like...
exactly. Drop and give me 20.
that's pretty
20
great.
more tears.
20. Fuck. So that's Arrows. Like I said, I think this record is amongst you guys' best, and I think it's very it's very interesting, rewards multiple listens, and I think that there's a lot for folks to love here. So redfang.bandcamp.com, Relapse, all the normal places you can think of to get music. You got this stream coming up in our personal timelines.
Yes.
It'll be the end of the week, right?
Yes. The 30th, I believe.
How are folks, where's that streaming at? That's I should have that in front of me. I don't.
It's at in.live. And I'm not sure. I mean, that's where you go to see it. I don't know where you go to buy it, actually. But if you look on our Instagram, it'll have all the information. Just
be like a dutiful older rocker and Google it.
Yes, exactly. That's what I would like right now. If I were to actually tell you details, that's exactly what I would do is Google it and figure it, because I don't know.
No, I don't know. The last thing I wanted to say, and I meant to bring up last time, I really appreciate how you guys bring support bands with, like when you go out on it seems like you take a special effort to bring bands that your audience can kind of get into that maybe wouldn't have the chance to play to a larger audience like that. And it occurs to me too that how much the music world would be a much better place if more people took that care and effort with it. But I mean, is that just like, do you feel like that's just an extension of how you guys came up from that world, and just playing with bands that you like and playing with bands that you want to turn people onto? Like what's the motivation for that? Because it's something that I've absolutely noticed with you guys, and I just wanted to comment on that because I think it's cool as hell.
Well, thanks. We definitely do take a good amount of. We put a lot of care, and we put time in to try to find and promote. Find bands that we really like. Whenever we get submissions from our agent for tours for support, we listen through all of them and make little notes and discuss it with each other. But in most cases, we're always trying to just tour with bands that we already know and like because they're our friends or because they're some band that we're fans of. And that comes from a combination of, we want things to we want to be excited about the other bands that we're touring with, and we want to be stoked to watch the other bands every night. But there's also this, we learned a lesson touring with Clutch and with Mastodon that those guys also totally do it that way. They're they don't even need to bring support bands anymore. The support bands don't fill the seats. All of those venues would be totally sold out if they just played by themselves. And they definitely take, Clutch and Mastodon both took chances on us and were extremely gracious and nice to us and supportive of us and all, the kind of crap that we needed and the learning curve that we were experiencing, having never really toured with big professional productions like that. And so we've always felt a, sense of gratitude to them for that. And it just is real obvious to us that you wouldn't just be well, whatever what's the best business move? We'll just do that. And we'll just bring whatever band is going to, fill the seats or whatever. And in a lot of cases, we've kind of fought with, it's not like real fights. It's just punching and stuff, punching and kicking and hair pulling with our
more wrestling, really. Yeah.
Yeah. With, with management and booking agents over wanting to bring a band that they're well, they don't necessarily have as much, like they aren't good for as many tickets, and we're like, we don't care. We want other people to know about this band because we're stoked on this band. And if it's like, and it's, but to be fair, our management and agency have also brought a bunch of rad bands to our attention. Like,
yeah.
And they do have good suggestions a lot of the time, and it's their job to do exactly that, which is to suggest bands that are going to fill the seats. And it helps us and the other bands. And so sometimes there's bands that we wouldn't have heard about otherwise. And actually a great example, the first time I ever heard of Whores was through our old agent. He was like, there's this new band. They have like one EP out. Here's their EP. I'm sending it to you.
Yeah.
And we were like, yes, we want to tour with those guys. And yeah, there's been a bunch of, or like even the label for our first record, she puts out a lot of really great records, and Kathy does, and we'll mention bands that we wouldn't have heard of otherwise, and we're just stoked on them, and so we want to bring them out. So we're real lucky because we're not as big, and we'll never be as big as Clutch or Mastodon, but we have enough of a draw that we can actually pay forward some of that, the good fortune that we have to help other people that we're stoked on reach more people than they would otherwise.
Yeah, man. And I think that's cool. And the whole paying it forward thing is very cool. And like I said, I think that it's an application of shine theory too. It's sort of like everybody looks better together.
Yes.
Nobody's taking anything away from anybody else. Like it just is like, you're just making this like Red Fang cinematic universe that includes all these other awesome bands as well, which is,
yeah,
I'm surprised
more
because
bands. It is weird because the other thing, right. But it's a weird thing because like we wouldn't exist if it weren't for other bands like that. That's where we get, that's our inspiration is from bands that we're stoked on. So as I think everybody is, like you write music because you hear other bands. You hear music and then you're like, that is rad. I want to do something like that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Nothing happens in a vacuum.
Right. Exactly. I think we talked about that on the first one too.
We probably did. And it's hilarious to me because one of my biggest pet peeves is like repeating myself. And then the cruel irony is I do it constantly on this show.
Well, everybody does. Yep.
But that said, hey, you know what? When something's true, and it bears repetition. So I'm going to turn that.
Exactly. Like if you wrote a song that didn't repeat any parts, it would suck.
Yeah, there's definitely sometimes I did that as a younger man where I'm like, was I getting paid by the part here? Like what, why not happen again? Like why just do this like for two measures? Stupid. Yep. Aaron, always a pleasure, sir. Looking forward to the stream. redfang.in.live. Go get it.
You found it.
$5. I did. I Googled it.
Nice.
So for those listening to it, this week, is it going to be archived or is it just like got to get the tickets?
It will. I think it'll be available for like 48 hours and they archive everything. So there's probably a point at which it will be available again somewhere down the road.
But of course, everything is a constant horror show right now, especially being a musician. So $5, man, come on! I've seen lesser bands charge more. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I hope $5 isn't a ripoff.
Yeah. I think you're doing great, Aaron. Thanks so much, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Till next time.
All right.
There he goes, Mr. Aaron Beam, Part 2, Red Fang. Arrows is the name of the record. redfang.bandcamp.com. It's on Relapse. Go get it. Let's hear a tune. We talked so much about it. Let's hear a tune or two here.
It's time to hurry home. You know he can't be left alone. Dim the lights and try to find a cure. And we may never know why the systems overflow, drowning all the storms inside his head. Why not try to find out? Why not scale the skies? Why would anything be a fix? Digging in again, try to be an honest friend. Wanna help but can't get too sucked in. Save yourself from him. Place the mask on nose and chin. Breathe in deep to steal the oxygen. Why not try to find out? Why not scale the skies? Why would anything be a fix? Why do you want to
Why? Which absolutely sounds like she's so heavy. How did I not catch that? That's hilarious. Yeah, and before that, Fonzie Scheme. As discussed, both excellent songs from the record Arrows by the band Red Fang. redfang.bandcamp.com. They're up there. Relapse, all that good stuff. Yeah. I dig this record a lot. I hope you guys do too. And if you haven't already, check it out. Actually, I'm going to go and say, if you haven't checked in with Red Fang in a while, check it out. I think you'll find some stuff to love there. So, that's my personal assessment. That Red Fang live thing, redfang.in.live. $5. Come on, man. You can do way worse than that. I'd like to thank Aaron for coming in for round 2 on Protonic Reversal. Love having that guy on. Interesting band. Name of the show, of course, is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so much for listening to it. This show airs on RadioNope.com live. 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. Usually Thursdays. It's another quarantine edition now. You can find all the archives at ProtonicReversal.com. Always free, no ads, no sponsors, no kidding.
Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea.
But if you do like the show and you want to get episodes sooner,
Within the sound of my voice.
Patreon.com/ProtonicReversal. $1 a month will achieve that goal, help support the show, all that good stuff.
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
Thanks so much to everyone, as always, for sharing the shows around, liking,
Ionize the air.
subscribing on YouTube, reviews, all that stuff. It seems absurd and silly, and it is, but it helps people find the show, and that's much appreciated. Thank you for listening as well.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Stay safe out there.
Now? Out on Route 128.
And take it
dark
easy.
And lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 See in the radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? If this had been a real emergency,